The 12 Rules by Estoni Shaw. Rule number 2. ComSec. Communication security is beaten into soldiers, sailors, and airmen and marines. Well, that's more figurative than it used to be, but you get the point. From the earliest iterations of their training. One of the biggest force multipliers on a battlefield is effective communications. Without working comms, an operation can fall apart, assets can be lost, and people can die. Even in training. For my part, providing support to units conducting training requires us to have working comms both in the mechanic shop and in our vehicles. Usually these comms are unsecured. Truth be told, just an old SYNCR set with the basic single channel and plain text configuration. Every once in a while though, when there's a big combined arms operation, we actually get orders to shadow the units through their evolutions to ensure their vehicles remain mission capable, and something as small as a cracked hose doesn't stop some would-be pattern from showing off to his commanders. And that, my friends, requires a radio fill to keep us all talking the same language. To keep it simple, a radio fill will be we'll call it a code. It makes sure that all our radios speak the same language on the same frequency at the same time, and that nobody else can listen in or communicate with us. So, after returning to duty and steadfastly adhering to the rules laid out by Mikey and the shop, we got attached to a brigade-level assault on the national fake city of Sokovia. Yes, seriously. I was pretty excited, to be honest. Sure, it'd be hard work and we wouldn't get much sleep for a week, but it's fun as hell watching entire battalions maneuvering through the desert, dancing with combat engineers acting as opposing forces, doing everything in their power to slow the assault. It started out as beautiful as you could imagine. Entire armor columns roared to life and advanced as one. Over a time, the harmony was flawless. But all plans start to fall apart when they encounter reality. We call it friction. An oil leak here, a heat stroke there, miscommunications on fuel point, you know how it goes. Reality is complicated and everyone makes mistakes. Before long, we found ourselves having gone without sleep for 2 days. Bouncing around the alien hellscape, trying to do whatever we could to keep the beast moving to its objective. After a particularly exhausting day, we received a call to help a Cav scout and got stuck on the far and inaccessible side of Sokovia. We knew what went wrong right away. Some enterprising young officer or non-commissioned officer tried to work their way through the hills to find their objective and broke down. And now we would have to go and pull an all-nighter to unfuck them. Problem was, we couldn't establish contact with them on the radio. Their commanders dialed us into the last grid they were seen at, stating their comm equipment had been acting up. That got Mikey's attention. He tried to clarify, but they weren't exactly wasting a whole lot of breath on a couple of knuckle-daggers like us. All the way out there, Mikey was acting fidgety. I knew ComSec was an important rule, with about 3 derivatives of which my predecessor broke 1. I was still wet behind the ears and hadn't yet grasped how serious things could get. We rolled up on a dead striker about midnight. Sokovia was lit up with all sorts of training rounds as the assaulting force began fighting building to building. So we had a pretty memorable backdrop. Mikey keyed the mic with a shaky hand. "Striker 2-6, you boys alright? We're here to get you back in the fight." Silence. We had pulled to a stop and we were still maintaining light discipline, but kept our distance from the dead vehicle. "Striker 2-6, copy?" Static echoed back for a time. Suddenly, someone hotkeyed the mic on their end and we could hear some weird, indecipherable tongue. In the background, we could barely make out heavy panting and screams. Mikey tried to key the mic, but the channel was awash. With the cacophony of misery, I was too stunned to even question it and let Mikey take the lead. We switched the channel over to the company frequency. "Striker Actual, this is Romeo Charlie. We have eyes on Striker 2-6. Can you verify the last comfill?" "Romeo Charlie, this is Striker Romeo. Last comfill was in 1600 today, but 2-6 was mission non-capable at the time, so they didn't get the update." Mikey looked at me, and even in the gloom, only illuminated by indirect fires, I could tell he had gone white. "What is it, man?" "Dude, they fucking didn't. They failed at ComSec 101, okay? Striker 2 has been out here without any communications with their chain of command for almost 9 hours." He continued to mutter obscenities at himself. "They know better. They all get the briefing." He sounded exhausted. Listen, 2-6 didn't get the comfill and they went off grid, okay? You know what usually happens when you get a couple of Joes who can't reach anyone all of a sudden? They switch over to unsecure comms and try to reach range control, or start using their cell phones, I finished for him. That's right, an unsecure comms out here on this range is a fucking no-no, for all sorts of reasons, not of least of which is Samantha. We'd been awake for almost 2 days, and despite the fact I'd learned not to doubt him, I could barely control my laughter. Shut the fuck up, dude! He cut me off mid-giggle. I'm sorry, I'm just tired. He carefully reached over to the radio and cleared it before I could react. He dumped everything. Our frequencies, our fill, everything. Now we were alone too. What the fuck are you doing? I almost shouted. He held his hand up, index finger pointing upwards, telling me to hold the fuck on. Then he pointed to the striker laying there, dark and seemingly abandoned. He reached a hand out to the driver's side window of our truck and rapped the roof with his Gerber, and an ear-piercing moan emanated from the ground. Okay, rookie, single channel, plain text, frequency 39500, go! I stared at him mouth agape for a mere moment before my reflexes kicked in and I went through the process of re-establishing the kindergarten levels of comms he was asking for. Once it was said, he keyed the mic, again. Hey, Samantha, what's going on? Static emanated from the radio while we felt a single reverberation travel through the ground beneath us, through the chassis, and into our bones. Samantha, that's not very nice. These boys just got a little lost. His knuckles were white, though his voice was calm. Another quake erupted from the desert, contrasted and masked by the continuing city assault in the distance. Listen, we need you to let them go, okay? We've got quite the show for you tonight. You can feel it, can't you? He said as if enticing a child out of a tantrum. Silence followed. For a few moments, then the striker itself shouted in defiance. I'm not trying to trick you. He spoke calmly in reply to a comment I clearly didn't catch. Sweat dripping down his face. We'll be happy to stay here with you and watch it together. Would you like that? For a moment, even the distance report of training ammunition was muted by an almost imperceptible evacuation of atmosphere from all around us. I instinctively breathed out to clear my lungs as vacuum engulfed us, and sound ceased to have any meaning. In my panic, I struggled and flailed hopelessly as if I were a kid again, having been thrown into a pool not knowing how to swim. Mikey, however, kept focus on the mission. He was tapping on the roof with his Gerber while I futilely clawed at the window. Morse code. He continued to bargain with Samantha even as we faced our end. Then, as soon as it had happened, it ended. The sweet stench of that hot desert air returned, and with it, my sanity. The striker's lights came back on all at once, so I could see her crew wandering around as if nothing had happened. Quicker to recover than I, Mikey stepped out of the vehicle. Hey, you guys alright? He wandered up to the NCOIC, who was clearly in shock. We missed the... Yeah, you missed the fill. We came out to see what was up. Everything okay? Your vehicle up and running? Yeah, everything's okay. He replied in a daze. Well, alright, well, don't forget the safety briefings, okay? You can't miss your fills on this range. Here. Mikey pulled out a small device and helped them load their radios properly. The confused NCOIC nodded as they got back in their striker and continued with their mission. Mikey stepped back into the cab and deflated. I don't know what the fuck is up with these units, man. Their command says they broke down and so they didn't get the fill, but that's bullshit. Leadership failed. They didn't even get the S6 out here. Just forget about them. Leadership dropped the ball and Samantha almost got those poor guys because of it. So we're getting the hell out of here, or Mikey looked at me wide-eyed, miming me to shut up. In a hushed tone, he gestured at the radio and told me, No, not if you ever want to get home. A promise is a promise, and thank God we had something to bargain with tonight. We're going to stay out here until sunup and keep Samantha company, and maybe we'll get a chance to leave. I didn't ask any more questions that night. As we witnessed the fall of a city, we sat there drinking cold coffee and slurping copious amounts of dip. Mikey kept the mic hot-keyed, narrating for our guests so Samantha could hear the song of Sokovia.